Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to give you another discussion video because I really like these. My last one with Giancarlo went super well. I love the conversation, so I decided to invite my brother, Mike, over there up in Minnesota to come in, chat about my previous video I just did, talking about the big four leaders and why I think they need to go. They need to be banned. We need to move on, go to a new type of meta because honestly, they've been around too long. And we're going to get into that discussion here. Mikey here, I actually got him into the game a couple years ago. He's grown into a great player on his own. Honestly, probably better than me, even, in a lot of ways. So I thought to get him in here to hear his opinions, because he actually plays, or he did play two of these decks pretty heavily. I played Gamma, I played a little bit of Gogeta, but you played a lot of Sin and trunksgeta. And honestly, it's better to have that opinion, to get the opinion from somebody who's played these decks instead of just me who's never really played them too much. I've dabbled, but not really ever gotten into them. So first and foremost, Mikey, thank you for coming on here and dealing with my rants on occasion.
Yeah, no, we have these conversations. I think people who care about the game and whether themselves want to get better, want the game to get better, or overall just like care about the game, they have some form of these conversations. And so we have enough of them between ourselves, and we just thought, why not put it on a video? So here we are.
Exactly. All right. So obviously, I love throwing out my very controversial opinions about the game on the web pages and the Facebook group. So this video actually been getting a lot of discussion going on about people saying like, yeah, a lot of people more are saying that we don't want these leaders around anymore. And this is coming from like a Gamma player, and I love Gamma. It's one of my favorite decks, but I'm just kind of done with all four of them. If I can get rid of the other three decks, I'm okay with Gamma being gone too. And that's just how it feels to me. The point, we've gotten to a point now where I want these gone so we can have a more diverse and more, more diverse meta essentially. But what are your thoughts on the top four decks being Gamma, trunksgeta, Sin, and essentially Gogeta?
Yeah, I think they are four of the best decks, if not the four best decks right now. I think opinions on this, like anything else in the community, people are going to say things are fine. People are going to say there's no need for it. And then there's people who will agree and say, yeah, like, let's do it. But the thing is, people who agree maybe with this take are going to do it in two different ways. One, they thoroughly cannot stand these leaders. They need a fresh start, or they're going to lose their minds. They're just tired of like maybe their locals bringing it. I know our locals for a stretch, especially leading up to Nats, was, half red, of course, like Nats was, and then you're going to have people who maybe are indifferent and kind of understand this is how games go. There are metas that do get stale, that believe maybe these could get hit a little bit, but are probably willing to just say, hey, like, it's the same thing. Just, I wouldn't mind a fresh start. Sure. And I'm of the people that like, yeah, I would like these to get hit. I don't think ban outright, like from the get-go, if there's a way to make them more playable but balanced with the rest of the meta, cool. But I am also a big fan of fresh starts, right? Like, it's just Gamma's been here since what, Ultimate Squad?
Yep, set 17.
Set before in Realm of the Gods.
16.
Yep. Sin and S4 were obviously Zenkai 1. And yeah, that was just 2 sets ago, but it feels like they've been around forever because that was the type of meta that we've had with these decks. So as my blanket statement, yeah, I don't mind these going just because there's just so many other more fun decks that are playable, that very much are playable, that you will see top events and you will see kind of find a place here and there. But when there's certain decks for certain colors that say, why play X when this exists? I think when that becomes all too popular of a sentence, for red, for yellow, for blue, obviously here, then I think it does create a problem. And yeah, while some people can live with it, I think what's probably healthiest for the game is doing something about it, whether that is banning, whether that is making a change or something along those lines.
Right, like, because we have seen Bandai is willing to make changes when enough people are vocal about it, like the ban to Crimson. Crimson came out the same set as trunksgeta, and for the longest time wasn't really that popular. It wasn't topping that many metas. People were running skillless versions of it and being like, oh, it's not as good as Soul Striker. And then all of a sudden, like, leading up to Nationals, but I think Nationals was like the big event that really put Crimson on the map. Like, so many people came in, like some of the top players came in with Crimson and absolutely decimated the top 32. No one really thought Crimson was going to be a issue, and a lot of the top players didn't talk about Crimson, which I'll admit is kind of shady that they kept this really good leader and strategy hidden for Nationals. But I get it, you're trying to win Nationals. But then all of a sudden they're just like, yep, we're banning this leader because it's being used too much. I think it was on the lines of to increase diversity, we are banning this leader. After they errata it, and the errata helped a little bit, but that wasn't the issue with the leader. The leader was just a great mid-range deck. It could be offensive, it could be defensive, it can do everything. But they banned it because their reasoning, it was too playable. It was too many people were playing it. So then logic then dictates, why can't we do that with these four? Because these are being played way too much, especially the red decks. It's like, why play anything red when you have Sin and you have Gogeta? Because like, for example, your Android 13 deck. I love that deck. I think it's super cool. But you even admit, if it goes up against Sin or Gogeta, it's gonna be an uphill battle, and it's just easier to play Sin or Gogeta. So I'm just saying, like, Bandai's shown that they are willing to do that. And they did that with the original Super Saiyan 3 leader, too, back in the day. Everyone was playing it. So why does it feel like they are doing everything they can to tiptoe and avoid doing anything to these top four decks?
Well, let's talk specifically on the red decks, just because it's a little bit different, I think, with those two besides trunksgeta and Gamma. But,
yes, those two particularly are just gatekeeping not only red, but it also feels like they're gatekeeping a lot of the format in general.
Right. So, like, I guess to put it simply, trunksgeta and Gamma are probably more generic, where much more cards like each set come out that you can go, oh, this goes into trunksgeta. Oh, this can slap right into Gamma. The thing about SS4 and Sin is that they're the epitome of like a whole archetype that you just release at once that is just snapped out of its mind.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Yellow Sin took 3 sets for it to be fully baked, and then it was really good for a long time. But like Sin and SS4 they just flat out do things that kind of break, I guess, the nature of the game. And like, we kind of talked about this as well. You kind of threw these stats out to me before we really started recording, but there's no banned red leader, correct? That's what you said.
Yeah, there's no banned. Yeah, there's no banned or errata red leader, but there's plenty of banned and errata blue, black, green, yellow. It's all there.
Right. So like, just based on that, sure, I think you can deduce that maybe Bandai has like this weird bias towards red. But I kind of mentioned that, well, with Broly swap with King Vegeta, those had their field card errata, which are like the keys to the engines for those decks, right?
Right.
But similar to SS4 and Sin, all these red decks that have been really good through the years is archetype based, right? Like no one's going, okay, well, we're taking the Broly swap stuff and throwing it into a different leader. We're taking the King Vegeta engine and putting into other stuff. No, these are decks that are locked enough to their leader, but are still so good that it's just causing a problem, right? And they're not banning the leader because you are then essentially banning everything else in the deck, and that's a quick way to lose that much more value. You know, there are still people when you errata some of these leaders into the dirt that will say, no, I still love this deck and I'll play it casually at locals. I'll still, you know, maybe since it's errata, the cards are cheaper, like max rarity, so they go do that. There's still like a market thing, consequences with errating them, but like if you ban them, there's no market for those cards. It's just a different market if you errata them and they're not competitive. You know, it's just a different clientele that want to buy them.
Right.
So yeah, so with SS4 and Sin, like, I don't know, they've just been the best red decks. They're I guess my biggest point I want to make about these decks is that They both break kind of a law of nature of the game, and I think whether you think, you listener, whatever, if you believe it's too gross, too negligent, too negative, too bad or unhealthy for the game, fine. But like, here's the deal: SS4 combos cards in rest mode, and like literally nothing else does that. It's literally a law of the game. You just cannot combo rest mode cards. This allows you to do that. So you're taking a red deck that can already get kind of crazy and kind of have strong plays, one cost cards that are 20k, double or critical, that draw, that neg something, remove something off the board, that type level, that power level. And they're able to do more because they can combo obviously in rest mode, and still get that combo power. So like, they're never dead. They're never just like a base 15k, right? The whole game, if they have anything in rest mode, unless you like attack that rest mode card,
Right.
they can't combo it. But like, are you going to swing a 15 into a 20, which all their good cards are, and lose a card out of your hand to possibly get rid of it? Like trade 1-for-1 and they save it, okay, whatever. Or if you swing their leader 15, they combo that rest mode card and you're 20 again, okay, well, you still get a card out of your hand to even try to do any sort of lethal damage. Like, it's just little things like that I think aren't healthy for the game. Obviously, right. The biggest conversation around SS4 is the 8 drop. Now, the thing is, I wouldn't go out and say ban the 8 drop, end sentence, move on with our life. I would say ban the 8 drop if you do ban the 8 drop, and then you have to immediately replace it with like 1 and maybe 2 other fusions for the deck to still make it like do what the deck wants to do.
Right.
But this is like a fusion deck. So like, why is it literally just 1 fusion that is the whole deck? The leader wants Gogeta GT cards. Well, there's only 1 to play. I mean, it's not like a fun deck in that sense, right? You only get 1 type of Gogeta card. We'll look at Gogeta Zeno. It had 2, 3, 4, I think, at its peak, after like its additional TPs and stuff.
And you had a couple different ones for the red Gogeta BR too.
Right. So like, give this deck just more Gogetas to play that aren't super snapped. Like the Gogeta 8, the fact that it is uninteractable is a big deal. I think like it not being able to be negated, I think you could even keep the fact that it can't be negated. But the fact that you cannot use non-super combo skills is where it does kind of go over this hump for me. Because in Realm of the Gods, they did just give us all these 1+ 10k or 15k, extra cards to kind of help be defensive or offensive or however you want to use them. That sure would be pretty cool if you swung Gogeta and like, okay, so you'd either have to use super combos or you use stuff like the iconic attack rares or Realm of the Gods to get out of it. So it means you also have to have those cards, and it also means you have to have the energy for it. Like, there's still some setup, right, that you have to be prepared for. And maybe they leave it as this Gogeta, it still clears your board, but when you swing into your leader, then you could use these cards, right? Sure, like it needs to be strong. It's Gogeta, right? It is what it is. It's thematic. It needs to be super strong, and then kind of disappear like you did in the anime. But like, there's just, I think, a healthier way to maybe tune that type of card.
Right, exactly. So
that's kind of my feelings on SS4. Sin in general, like they released a deck that on turn 2 you have 6 Z energy. And while those balls cannot be used for anything that's not obviously your awakening, your Z awakening, it still matters for cards that get better the more Z energy you have. That's the problem, right?
Right.
No other deck can literally on turn 2, like you can literally charge pass, say you go second, 1 up, and more than likely you've got 3 or 4 balls in there, which means that new Gohan counterplay is live. Nothing is stronger than like, okay, first off, if you're playing a deck that on their turn 2 going first, they're super stoked. They're going to get to play their main engine card, value card on turn 2, and hopefully kind of swing momentum in some way. And then you tap 1 and go, okay, no, I'm going to kill it. And also I have a 20k blocker, barrier, not blocker, double strike on board. Is absolutely insane. And then obviously we don't need to get started on how it enables rush attack, which is such a snap card in the first place. That might need to go at some point, but like, also, that card wouldn't feel nearly as bad if it wasn't used in decks that just churn out Z energy, because that's what S4 and Sin do. So the biggest thing about Sin is Gogeta has its combo in rest mode and it's uninteractable, which is just like, again, such a unique breaking the laws of nature of the game thing. And then Sin kind of does it similarly, that you're not like negging cards from hand to gain Z energy like every other deck wants to do. You are drawing 2 cards and gaining a Z energy. There's like no negative to that. I mean, it's just, if you put these things in a vacuum, that's why they're so strong. And I get people want to say there's ways to deal with it. Yeah, I get it. blue's a thing, dirty burst is a thing. I'm not talking about that. We're not talking about that it's unbeatable or anything like that. We're talking about just like in a vacuum, just like logically, it doesn't make sense for these things to like exist. It doesn't sound good for the game, because if someone came up to you and was like, here's an archetype, this is what it does, and you handed them before, like SS4 and Sin don't exist, they hand you the archetype and they say this one does this and this one does this, and you look them over and you go, don't do this, don't make these cards, don't like, no, how are we getting from here Ultimate Squad to these? It just doesn't make any sense. So that's kind of the best way I can put it, that there's just something crazy about them, obviously.
Right. No, Red, I love the way you talk, because you articulated that perfectly. You broke it all down, because yes, that's why those two decks are so great, is Gogeta breaks a lot of the fundamental rules of the game with its gameplay, whether it's the 8-drop Gogeta and the comboing of rest cards. You constantly always have cards in hand. You constantly have cards in your Z energy to play your bigger cards, like the Vegeta Rush attack. Sin is... I'm glad that they listened and they nerfed Sin by banning Haze. That was absolutely the right move. No deck should be able to play a double strike 20k crit on their turn 2. That should not be possible. That was awesome. I thought that was a great move. And then they're like, hey, we may have gone too far. Here's 2 new red promos. One specifically is a Sin Shenron card. Another one is a Gohan card. There you go. Sin's back up to where he used to be. And we're going to ban the leader that really gives Sin a hard time. Like, that was just such a bad decision on Bandai's part. Like, there was no reason to do that. Sure, ban Crimson if you think it's overplayed. But why the hell did you give Red these 2 amazing promos? And when you look at those promos, what other promos in that pack were good for any other color? Not really.
There were other good cards, but in terms of like the power level, like their potential in their decks, not at all. I mean, like, there's other good blue cards that, kind of do what Oob and Goku do.
Oob and Goku.
Green,
I forgot that.
I think green needed more removal, and I think giving it essentially barrier removal on a stick isn't too shabby. The Zeno, I think, was a mistake, because
that
is waiting for another U11 deck with like a Topo leader or something.
The Goku Black Ultimate deck.
It's a terrible decision. I tested into that Goku Black deck. We did a best of 3, and only in game 3 did I throw Zeno in, and literally I saw Zeno on turn 2, or at least through the first couple turns, played it, and like then I just cakewalked the whole game. I mean, it was like insane. Goku Black decks, unfortunately, are always going to be manhandled by too much sequencing and setup to then have it be destroyed by like one card that Bandai didn't realize makes a new product like completely unplayable. So
I would not be surprised if Zeno got banned at some point, because against that deck, it completely destroys it.
Well, if they're done making archetypes based off the Tournament of Power, then yes, then Zeno has to go, because even U7 decks, which they just can't get enough of U7, man, Zeno is still an issue for those decks as well.
100%. Okay, now I think we did a good discussion point with Red. We talked about why it's so broken. Now, what would be some things that you would? So, like I said, I don't want to ban these decks. I hate banning leaders. I feel like it's stupid, because what's really bad about banning these leaders is specifically they are heavily archetype based. Most of the cards in their deck require a red Sin leader or a red Goku and Vegeta GT leader, which I was screaming from the rooftops before, like, we need decks with amazing archetypes. Let's do that. And they did, but only for these 2 decks. Like, Gamma is kind of archetype based. It's just heavily reliant on Blue Android or a Red Ribbon Army, which there are other Blue Androids, and there is a Red Ribbon Army card. So those cards can be thrown into another deck, so it's not as archetype based. trunksgeta is more generic, good yellow stuff with a couple Vegeta and Trunks cards thrown in there. But these 2 particular are incredibly archetype based. So if you ban the leaders, you ban essentially most of the cards in that deck, except for like the super rares. Super rares surprisingly don't have requirements. Like the Sin archetype. Sorry, the Sin SR.
Triple Striker.
Yeah, that card can be thrown in any red deck. The moment I saw that in Red Vegito, it blew my mind. But so I don't want to see them banned. But what would you do to make, I guess, nerf them? Sin, in my opinion, the Z leader has to require red energy to play. It should not be played for free. I don't understand where they thought that was a good idea to play that for free. And I think Sin should only be allowed to play red Shadow Dragon cards. Like, it should not be allowed to play any other red character that's not Shadow Dragon. It gets rid of the Gohan. It gets rid of Broly Crown, I think, for it. They would lose the best super combo. It would lose Red's best super combo, but I don't know. That's just my opinion, at least for Sin. What do you think on that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people would probably agree that free, like no energy Z Awakens are definitely like a step up from the majority of stuff, right? Like Majin Vegeta's free Z Awaken, pretty good. And it's not just like free Z Awaken, it's into a 20k.
Yep.
Which means you are essentially, you're like beaning your leader, right, when you do it defensively for free. And usually do it late enough game that like for sure you have the Z energy to do it. So I think giving an energy cost 1 red, sure, easy enough. I think the freeness of the Z energy, the balls to count towards other effects, I think is not locked down enough. I think that it should only literally be used or count toward your Z Awaken. I think there should be an errata that these do not count towards like any other non-Shadow Dragon battle card effect.
Yes,
so however
exactly.
you want to word that.
Yes.
Right. So like if you do pay 2 for rush attack and you only have your balls in there, that's not for Z energy. It's just not, right? Like just be like every other red deck that has to somehow get 5 other non-Dragon Ball cards into your Z energy to kind of make that whole thing find its max value.
Agreed.
I think those are the biggest things. I can't really think of anything else. I think the Sin Triple Strike is still kind of snapped.
I think
like
making that unique might be a good option.
Possibly, but unique also kills the viability, I think, of its ultimate, where you neg 2 things 20 and then you remove 6 balls to play out a free Triple Striker from hand. Because if you played one beforehand, then you can't use that effect to its full potential. I think there's something to that, right? But like, what snapped is not playing 2 big Triple Strikers, because each of them you swing and like it's the neg skills reactivate battle, right? So like a token negate still hurts, a hard negate, still stops them in its tracks. But where they become super messed up is defensively, when you're trying to like break through. Say you survived Sin's whole thing. Right. They played 2 Triple Strikers on you. They did all kinds of stuff, and you've somehow survived. And then defensively, you're like, okay, cool. I need to kill you, and you're at they're at 3 life, obviously, 3 or less, because they played the free Triple Striker and their Z Awaken. Right. But then you're like, okay, now you've got, unless you have in hand a card that says this gets rid of an 8 cost, God forbid it has barrier, right? Because you can do that by ditching the Oceanus. Yeah. You have to get through basically 2 things that say you have to swing. If you swing with a battle card, and like one, you can't dump on it because I'll kill it, right? So you basically have to like just say, okay, these are my 2 big things that are gonna force you to kill them with the ability, and then like after those 2 things are done, then you can try and kill them. But that's also, you're fighting through Dragon Thunder, which is free beans. You're fighting through the Rage Shenron token negate, essentially, which is the most snap thing. Honestly, it gets more and more crazy with each set that comes out, because Android 17 is the free counter for similar to Rage Shenron, but you play it in rest mode, right? We just saw Garlic Jr. has one. You play it in rest mode. And that one doesn't even have blocker. So like, and the 17 doesn't have blocker. It's a 15k crit body, but like you better hope it survives. So like everything that it gave Sin in terms of defense is crazy, because it gave it some of the best offense and then backed it up with some insanely free defense. So it's just, there's a lot of things they could change, but I think it pretty much centers around its Z leader and the ability that it just has a fat Z energy, quote unquote, with the Dragon Balls. Right.
And I think that kind of goes into why, like, the things I would change with Gogeta too, which is very similar. It has incredibly high offensive and great defensive. Specifically, the the Z leader for Gogeta, the fact that it can be played for defensive purposes, if I'm going in for an attack, if I'm trying to go in for the last kill, and they're like, cool, Z Awaken into Gogeta, I'm now 100k, and you have to now combo out of that. Which is...
Okay, I get that, but also, you understand if you force them to Z Awaken, you've probably won the game.
That is true. Yeah.
That's the thing. I get it that, like, maybe, you know, from the hip, you're like, this is, you know, it's 100k. It just seems really crazy. But remember, if you get them to Z Awaken, they don't restand anything. So, like, if you make them Z Awaken and they don't have the Gogeta on board, you literally don't have to worry about anything. You worry about leader swing and maybe an overrealm, and then that's it.
Right.
But yes, I believe that it feels really good when they Z Awaken and they have Gogeta, because you don't kill them, and then on the next turn they still have one more swing with their triple striker, and then leader, and then whatever else. So
right,
I get that, but truly, I don't think the Z leader is the problem. I think we've obviously covered that there's a lot of other things and issues with SS4.
Right. Now with SS4, I think a great option would be to prevent it. I think the ability to combo Saiyans in rest mode should be limited to once per turn.
Right, and that's similar to like a Dark Broly thing, why they did that to Dark Broly, is that it kind of becomes weird for a deck so tall, that can get so tall or aggressive, that can also like defend. You know, like they don't have to overextending is not a thing. They go, yeah, tap 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 and swing, and then defensively they're like, okay, if you swing 15k, well, here's a rest mode card away. Here's 20.
Right, exactly.
Like, it's way too easy, right?
Get rid of that. Get rid of that ability to. So on the Awaken side, change the ability to when it attacks, draw one or play a Saiyan in rest mode, not and. That way you don't get the draw, plus you don't get the ability to play something in rest mode, which then gives you the ability then to combo with said card. It just, like, because I'm pretty sure, isn't its ability when you combo with a card in rest mode, you draw one, so it essentially becomes a draw two?
I'm going to double check here. You think we would have it?
Well, I mean, I have it. I have some of the red cards here in front of me that are specifically the Gogeta. Here we go.
Yeah, just double check, because I thought it was just swing and play, and then when you play something, that draws, and then you combo it, and that draws.
Okay, yep. So it doesn't draw. Its ability is not when you draw something. It's not when you play a card you draw. Or you combo with it, you draw. It's just, but there are certain cards that if you combo with it in rest mode, you draw.
Right. So you're talking about swing, draw, play, draw, combo, draw?
No, yeah. So basically what it is, you attack with it, you draw one. You play one of your rest mode Saiyans, one of the Goku or Vegetas that when you combo with it in rest mode, you draw one. They get to play that for free. And then they just essentially draw one.
You swing, draw, play a card in rest mode that draws on play, and then you combo the rest mode you just played, which then draws.
Essentially, yeah.
The rest mode said?
Yeah.
Okay, so 3. You just drew 3 cards swinging.
Yeah, it's essentially a draw 2 or 3 cards. Yeah, that's absolutely insane to me.
Sure, yep.
That should not be a thing. So I think it would help lower that by making it you either swing, you draw one, or you play a Saiyan in rest mode. You don't get both.
I think it's fair enough. You have, I think maybe you just take the draw on swing away, because if the main thing you're playing is these rest moded cards, then if you took the on swing draw, you are still having 5k and then drawing 2, right? So
right.
That seems fair enough. So you're a 20k swinger that draws 2 instead of a 20k leader that draws 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Anything to make that seem a little bit more
right. And like I said, I believe it's either it can draw 2 essentially each turn, or it can draw 3. It depends on what cards they play. Sure. But yeah, I mean, red has there are such cool red decks. You know, we talked about, Gogeta and Sin, the problems with them and what we want them, to be nerfed to. But like, imagine a world they're gone. Bandai says, you know what, we're just banning these leaders. It's too much of an issue. We're just not going to deal with it anymore. There's a lot of really cool red decks that can come in and, finally see some more action. Android 13 is a really cool deck that has a lot of potential, like dual attack triple strikers. It's solid as heck.
Dual attack double.
Pan.
We're not triple strikers.
Oh
We're
no,
not
doubles,
Vegeta.
doubles. Yeah. Reboot Pan is a solid red deck overall. It's just not as good as Sin and Gogeta when it comes to that. Red Vegito's still a thing. We have a bunch of really cool leaders that could see more play, but it just, as long as these two decks show up, Sin and Gogeta, every new red deck that comes out is going to be like, but is it better than these two? And if the answer is no,
what it comes down to is baseline. It's like, does it draw as much? Does it put out as much pressure as cheaply as these? Like those are the universal questions when it comes down to comparing decks. But specifically for red, it's how much does your cards cost? Do they draw? Do they remove? How much value do you get per energy? Like it gets really that specific. And right now it better come down for one. It better have a keyword. It better draw, or it better remove something.
Right. And that's why, like, personally, that's my big reason why Sin and Gogeta just need to go. They need to get nerfed because it gatekeeps. Those two decks are probably the two decks that gatekeep the meta the most. Because every deck, not even just red, every deck that comes out, you got to think, how well do they match up against Gogeta and Sin? If the answer is not good, then you're not going to play them.
Yeah, I think, like, people can have their opinions. Again, you can have your opinion that you're okay with these decks existing, that you're okay with, figuring it out and whatever. But, like, we're not just going to completely ignore decks that, how do I put this? That shape the meta, that completely warp the meta, that force the majority of players to think about said decks. I think, look, if you're the person that just says this is what all card games go through, I agree with you. But the difference between like good and bad card games and healthy and not healthy games is like how they deal with them and how timely they deal with them. If they deal with them right or wrong, or like they do enough to make people happy or whatever else. Like there's levels to this. It's not black and white. But like something has to be done. We're just not gonna ignore it.
Right.
Everyone probably listening to this video and in the community has had to worry about SS4 or Sin or something like that. Or I've probably said the words, man, I really love this deck, but this deck exists. Like, I mean, it adds up. Like, let's just be honest with ourselves. Like, yes, we're going to vary on whether that is like forcing us to action, to voice our opinions and voice it to go. Some people may say those things and go, well, I'll just deal with it and move on. Okay. Some people aren't going to let their words be heard in the community, but there are going to be plenty that point it out.
Right.
And honestly, I think like it's all worth listening to. It's just if you're going to have a strong opinion, but you better come correct with information and why or why not. Which again is why we're not just saying ban the shit. We hate it. It's just so much fun. Blah blah blah. We're not doing that. Like we're going in and explaining why or why not it is good or not, healthy or not, and stuff like that.
Exactly. That's why like I love these discussions. I have issues with these things, so I'm going to come at you with my thoughts. Evidence I have, and I love these types of discussions. I think we spent half the video talking about red. So let's, which were a huge point of this game. Let's hop into yellow. You love yellow too. Yellow's one of your favorite colors to play. And trunksgeta. Trunksgeta won Worlds. And it's the most good generic yellow deck, because you can put all the good yellow generic cards in it and then splash in a couple Vegeta and Trunkses so you can use its abilities. But for the most part, Trunksgeta is really just yellow good stuff, which yellow has seemingly been on a trend of trying to find the best yellow good stuff deck leader to play. Originally we had Icarus, and Icarus was all over the place, and they nerfed it. So then no one wanted to play it anymore. Which then, after that, I'm pretty sure that led right into trunksgeta, because it was, once again, just the next best generic yellow leader. And it's been it's the most featured yellow deck since its release in set 16, which is now soon to be 5 sets ago. And we've had 4 sets of yellow leaders that have come out and are decent, but not anywhere near the comparison to trunksgeta. Yellow Kid Coup reboot was a big one that showed up and is a solid deck in my opinion. I really like it, but it's just you have to run more things that are archetype specific. Humans, Earthlings, Kid Goku, stuff like that. Which Trunksgeta doesn't have to do that. He gets to run Trunks and Vegeta cards that have barrier. So can't get rid of them. They're always going to be on the board. This one's a little harder to do.
The one Trunks for Trunksgeta.
Right.
Vegeta does not have barriers.
Oh, the Vegeta doesn't have barrier.
It is the Trunks, but I mean it's a good freaking card. So
right.
Still is what it is.
So this one is kind of hard to do. I don't think it's broken by any means. I don't think it's a busted leader in comparison to Sin and Gogeta. But it comes down to the same reasoning as Crimson was banned. It's the most played yellow leader. Crimson came out the same set as it, and only really shined for 3-4 months before it got banned. And Trunksgeta has been progressively at the front and has never... It's still there. Like... I don't know. It just feels like, why hit Crimson when Trunksgeta does the exact same thing and it's still fine?
Well, sure. I think this is a weird situation where people look at the fact that it's just been there and assume that means that it's like as oppressive or does similar stuff for the color. Yellow really isn't in that bad of a place. And let me preface with this. Trunksgeta won Worlds. Like, that's a sentence, it's true. But also, it won an 8-man tournament with the expectation that there was going to be mainly Crimson. And it was built to beat Crimson.
Yep.
And that's it. So, like, people who say, I can't believe Trunksgeta won Worlds and it didn't get hit. Stop. Because you're looking at it all wrong. Trunksgeta is a very good deck, but you're not going to point to an 8-man tournament, no matter if it was the best 8 players in the world. That deck is not good. If you took that, I wouldn't say it's not good, but if you took that build and took it to locals, it's not a good build because they literally was super specific to beat Crimson. Like you wouldn't just like cookie cutter that and take it to locals and expect to win because it won Worlds. That's not what we're talking about. At least it shouldn't be how it should be looked at. But you're right that Trunksgeta is a good yellow stuffed out deck that draws a ton of cards, that has really good cards within its archetype, obviously. That Trunks is huge, right? It is a Poutine, like a better one. And you couple it with Poutine, it is a barrier blocker. You have the Vegeta negate that helps restand. Like, it's got really good synergy with some TPs and stuff like that. But overall, Trunksgeta, yes, you could say it's the best yellow deck. I wouldn't necessarily go so far, though, to say that it gatekeeps yellow as a whole. Because Golden is having plenty of fun and time in the sun. I didn't even rhyme there. But, like...
Golden is about to get way better, too, with this next set.
I mean, we'll see. I'm not totally sold on that. I think there's some stuff you could do, but like I think they've actually done a pretty good job of making sure that it's not super just like thoughtless and splashable in Golden, maybe. But as of right now, I wouldn't totally assume that. But like Golden, nonetheless, is still really good. And like Golden used to be not playable because like Red existed and Red was too good. Because a Yamcha Merciless Barrage just like ruins your day because it kills your 1-drop if you misplayed wrong. The thing about Golden now is that with that Gohan and Icarus unison, you can recur from the drop, so you don't have to worry about like playing the only Frieza's army from your hand and then having to like hope and pray it doesn't like get warped or KO'd or whatever before like the turn cycle comes back around, right? You will always have access to a Frieza's army because of that unison. So now Golden doesn't care about Red and all the negging and stuff. Like, yeah,
right.
it kind of sucks and it hurts the deck a little bit if you sequence wrong, but like overall, I think the deck's fine. You talked about 8 coup. It does have its place. I think it's going to be one of like, like within yellow itself, a tier 2 yellow deck because you need the Yamcha, you need the Bulma Unison and all this stuff. But then obviously we can't forget about Maj and Vegeta. Like this deck is also really good. The cards all kind of say like if your leader is a Vegeta leader and you've got a Goku or a Vegeta in play and stuff like that. So like the way the cards are read it's all good. Like Majin Vegeta probably draws just a little bit less than Trunks Geta, but it's still a very viable yellow deck, and it's all about flavor with that, right? Like Trunks Geta is more mid-range, can even lean control when it really wants to turtle down. While Majin Vegeta, you have all the good yellow stuff, but it's that good yellow stuff defensively is backing up one drop 25Ks that draw and remove something.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's just got its own type of cards. It's a little more aggressive, like it can be aggressive. It really can pop off. Everything costs one and does something and kills something and has a keyword. So I really do think yellow is in a good place. I think if there's any deck among these four that we're kind of talking about here, Trunks Geta like probably is the most fine one.
Right. I agree with that.
It's
I agree with
epitome of a solid deck that doesn't do anything that makes you go, "What the shit? This deck's what?" You don't have that opinion. It's just Trunks Geta. It's really good. It's really solid. And I think the only argument is like, I'm kind of just bored of Trunks Geta. Like I think that's probably the only argument there.
Yeah, that's the main argument. The 3-drop I think is a little busted how it's basically just another poutine with blocker. But beyond that,
sure,
it's
play around it. Like if you know how to play around it, play anything.
Yep.
Play anything. Play a 1-drop cantrip, it's done. So like it's still really good, but you're right. Like it's solid, but yes, there are ways around it.
It's definitely the least threatening of these four. And like you said, Majin Vegeta, I really like that deck. It's really fun. It's very aggressive. It can be super defensive if necessary. It can play Cell Zeno, SCR like incredibly easy. And I definitely think if Trunks Geta was gone, Golden Frieza and Majin Vegeta would easily swoop in and to fight for that position as number one best yellow deck. And Golden would have a really good opportunity to be the top deck for yellow because it's essentially a better blue deck than most blue decks out there. It does the blue thing, but in yellow. But it has yellow's more stally based control, which it's getting the best of both worlds because hell, Golden was used in a blue yellow deck for a long time, and then when they errata Bean to be more defensive, it went right back to being more defensive. More just focused on yellow. But yeah, I mean, Trunks Geta, if it was gone, if it stayed around, But I just think it's more so we're tired of it. We're tired of seeing the same leader. But yeah, I think so. Yellow's the least threatening of these. Now let's talk about my boy here. My favorite deck I'm playing right now. I built it after months of not playing it, after playing the crap out of it for nationals. Gamma is without a doubt, now that Crimson's gone, the best blue deck in the format, at least in my opinion. Because it's got the consistency, it's got the untapping, it's got the floodgates upon floodgates. It's basically decks like Gamma and Crimson have to exist, in my opinion, because Red, Gogeta, and Sin exist. It is a necessary evil because they exist. That's why I'm very much on the side of ban them all so we can just move on and try new things. But like I said, I'm a fan of Gamma, but I'd be fine if it was banned, as long as Gogeta and Sin are banned. It does a lot. It has, like Derek was talking about, floodgates for days. And it's incredibly annoying to go into a constant floodgate. But my argument against that is that when I play you stop my floodgates a lot of the time.
Yep.
And so I'm just like, why is that even a big deal? Like, floodgates can be stopped. You have a counterplay, done. Doesn't do anything. And a lot of decks nowadays run a good amount of counterplays because they know floodgates exist. They know it's a floodgate based meta. But what are your thoughts on Gamma?
Yeah, so I've never played Gamma myself because I'm not a blue player.
Yeah, but you play against me all the time.
Times against you, plenty of Gamma players at my locals. Played Gamma once or twice at Nats and some events. I think that deck's really cool in that it started the blue-green Android like terror that we're kind of like going through right now. It just has the best of everything. Like it has its in archetype cards that are good, and then essentially since it came out, there's just been so many blue green and mono blue cards that are androids. And so the more cards that come out that just have the tag android and that do anything worthwhile makes that deck better. And it's the same thing with new 21. It's the same thing possibly with expert 21. It's the same thing with android 16. That the blue green android thing is so synergistic that you have so many cards that go get other things. The super combos are impactful and also android tagged. Your floodgates are android tagged, and all the costs are underneath the cost for the searchers. That can create a really annoying effect. I get it. People are tired of playing decks that no matter like what their opening hand is, unless they open with like 3 unisons and dead cards, your hand goes, okay, well, I'll pitch this to go find this. I'll pitch this to go find this, because you have like this deck specifically, right, has the 14 and 15, go grab something. Yep. You've also got the Android 18 SR that drop it, go find, I think, a 5 cost or less.
Yep.
And so you have up to like, twice in one turn, you could search 5 and then 5 again to find your Android 14 floodgates, your Android 17 floodgates. Yes, all that filtering kind of does enough that maybe on your hard draws, you're able to find your dirty bursts and your stuff that may not be Android tagged. So I get it. I maybe haven't felt super devastated or like held down by this floodgate after floodgate, because yeah, sure, I think I just happen to play decks that have stuff that stops floodgates that like come in at 2 cost or less or 15k or less power and stuff like that. So I'm not saying that like all these people are wrong by any means, saying that like this deck can floodgate a billion times. Yeah, I know it can and I believe it can, but I personally haven't had that experience. Does it mean that I think the deck should stay? I don't know, to be honest. Like, I think it's fine if it goes, because it just is what it is in terms of the best blue deck, right? But the thing is, it's not as generic as Crimson, and it's not as generic as Soul Striker.
Yeah.
If Gamma goes, sure, I think literally people go, okay, I'll play 21. Okay, I'll play Android 18, Android 16, and those are all still viable decks. I think
all
Soul
Androids.
Striker makes an appearance if this deck goes. I mean, like, I think there's a lot of other blue decks that become so much more of a pick your flavor, as opposed to like, this is the best. And let's be honest, it's not the best blue facilitator right now. It's the best. What's the best blue-green facilitator for the most part?
Right.
And I just think that's what it comes down to. So yeah, like sure, I think Gamma can go. I think it's tough for Bandai to do that because it's superhero, and superhero is still the wave right now that they're trying to push. But I think it's a good deck. I think it's a great idea. But let's just put it this way: I get what everyone is saying. I'm acknowledging that they have a point. But at the end of the day, I think I'm indifferent on it. Only if it continues to truly be like, this is the best blue deck, why play anything else? Similar to, obviously, our red discussion.
Right, exactly. Like, for example, I got these 3 leaders actually right here in front of me. If Gamma were to go, we have options like, I have 4 cards. We have Soul Striker. We have Super Saiyan Trunks, Future Trunks, which has built-in critical, like, negate. And it's great with this blue Saiyans. Solid stuff. We have the new Android 18, which is really odd to play, but is pretty fun still once you learn the tempo of it. And it's pretty aggro. Speaking of aggro blue, we got Super Saiyan Gohan. Like, I know my camera's going all crazy.
You just gave 4 decks, but I mean, you also didn't put up new 21. You didn't put up Expert 21. You didn't put up Android 16.
Oh yeah, I don't have those with me.
I think blue has a lot of leaders that are viable, that, like I said, truly becomes a what is your flavor type situation. Yep. And I mean, again, I don't play enough blue, so like maybe someone who is a big blue player watches this and goes, okay, well, if they get rid of Gamma, then it's literally just like new 21 as by and large the best blue leader. Like, I don't exactly know if that's how it goes. Someone will know better than me, but like that could possibly be a thing. If that is the thing, if Gamma goes, it's just new 21, then you're kind of in a similar situation, because again, why play anything else? Except like 21, obviously, it only gets so good because you're playing the specific Android 21 battle cards with her effect.
Right.
But you get what I'm saying. You know, like it seems like if that's not the case, if it doesn't just go from one deck to the other being king, then you do have a lot of decks with a lot of flavor. And I think blue probably becomes a lot healthier, especially entering this next set where it seems like we're getting obviously a blue Majub, I think, leader.
That's
blue
going to be sick.
And then him being paired with possibly a new blue baby as well. Like, I just think blue could be in such a healthy spot, maybe if you get rid of Gamma. But again, I'm not going to sit here and say Gamma like has to go because I'm not going to say I'm the most educated on what the residuals would be should Gamma leave.
As someone who is, you know, the resident blue player in my group, besides one other guy, shout out Matt, great dude. And I think that, like you said, blue has so many great options. But because other decks like trunksgeta, trunksgeta, gogeta, and Sin are around, it limits to what's more viable. There are a lot of options, but you have to think what's your best matchup. You have to think how the matchup is going to be against those three, particularly the Gogeta and Sin. Gohan, I love this leader. I piloted him into a side event in Nats. He did really well. But it's just, he's super aggro. He's the blue aggro deck, but against a real aggro deck like Sin and Gogeta, it shuts down. And if those decks, and hell, even Trunksgeta, were not around, this could be a lot more viable. Same thing with all these other blue decks. As of right now, because those three decks exist, Gamma is just the best matchup when it comes to all three of them. Now, if all four of these were to leave, including Gamma, the floodgates would open. And so many people will be trying to find the next best blue deck. And, you know, me personally, I'd probably be hyping back on the Soul Striker train again, because I love that leader and I keep trying to find ways to make that leader good. Again, it's just the meta dictates what decks people play. And I just feel like it would hurt a lot of people that specifically only play those four decks, and a lot of them probably would leave the game. Unfortunately, that is a possible effect that it would have. But at the same time, you have to think there's a lot of people leaving this game because they're sick of the top four being a constant thing they have to think about. They're sick of looking at new cards and being like, man, these leaders and archetypes are not nearly as good as these top four. So it's like, why even play them? Now, we are starting to hit a bit of more diversity. I've been looking at the breakdowns of tournaments, and I'm seeing more and more of that, which is awesome. But you can't deny, you look at these, and you still see a huge portion of those graphs are the top four still. And then like little slivers of other decks that squeaked in. There are answers to a lot of decks. There are answers to Gogeta and Sin in the form of cards like, you know, Dirty Burst, Bigamore, this one drop black.
Counterplay is huge for yellow. Basically, blue had the ones that were easiest to use.
Yep.
And then yellow getting the new Vegito counterplay was absolutely massive because that gives yellow some form of a Dirty Burst. Bigamore, sure, but like you're still slapping it, or paying 2 for it in green.
Yep.
And if your opponent goes, okay, cool, because I think if Bigamore, correct me, is just like 5 or more, can't attack or something like that.
Correct.
Could be wrong. If that's the case, SS4 goes, okay, well, I'm going to play a bunch of 4 costs that arrival off of each other and rush attack, and I do a bunch of other crazy stuff anyway. So,
right.
Just the thing about Dirty Burst and why it makes it good is that you force your opponent to commit to the big thing, and then you go Dirty Burst. While Bigamore in green is just, okay, well, I'm going to play this on my turn. Please don't have the things to make this hurt when it comes back around.
Or
right? Like it's just different.
Yeah, or the Shin, you play it, but it only goes off if you have 3 or less energy.
Right, so yeah.
It's kind of useless after turn 4. Like, you're just... It's so blue has the best option against it. So when people say, oh, 8-drop Gogeta or 8-drop Sin, you know, there's counters to it. It's like, are there really? There's one. I mean, there's one viable option at all times.
That's such a blanket, generic statement. Like, those people don't understand that that's not okay enough to say. There's counters to it. Okay, well then what are the counters? What's the reliability that you see those in hand? Because we all know drawing the out is not the thing anymore, right? A person who plays two of the out and just happens to luck out and see that against these decks the majority of the time probably feels pretty good about it. But then say you're a player who maybe main decks even more copies of that out, and you just happen to like never see them when you play these main decks, you're gonna feel pretty bad. The people who just want to shout out blanket statements and say that like nothing's wrong, or they want to troll and cry on certain posts talking about like just wanted to have a conversation. The poster's not even complaining about him. He just wants to have a conversation. These people come out and just put clown faces out and stuff like that. They have literally no idea what they're talking about. They're not to be taken seriously, and it just sucks that those people are in the community, unfortunately.
Right. Think of it like this. People are like, oh, well, dirty burst, you know, just always leave two open and you'll be fine. It's like, okay, cool. What card does red have at its disposal that can be played for one, and it's triggerable only if your opponent has two or more energy active?
Right. Obviously, Broly Crown is a thing. What's cool is that depending on the situation, if they Broly Crown and you decide to like Dirty Burst at that point, Broly Crown doesn't get its effect because when you counterplay, you're not at 2 when his auto resolves. That's same thing with Vegito and Yellow. You Vegito on Broly Crown, and they go, okay, I can't look at your hand now because you've only got 1 energy up when my Broly like does its thing. So there are outs to Broly Crown, but like you're right that if you don't have the means to not make Broly Crown hurt, then yeah, of course that feels pretty bad. Broly Crown is still a really good card. Hand knowledge and hand destruction in red is snapped and was never a good idea, but
for one, that's just,
you know, again a different conversation.
Different,
but yeah, we get it.
Yeah, but damn, we're about an hour into this. Definitely longer than I thought it would go into, but honestly, this has been a good discussion. You know, I feel like we've hit a lot of talking points. How would you wrap it up after everything we've talked about here? What would you say you want to happen, or you think will happen with the big four?
Well, before we officially wrap up, we've talked about like the colors that are matching with these big four. It should be known that like green will come back to a certain level of playability should these red decks get hit, because green is how we check blue, and depending on certain yellow decks as well, green helps into that. Because green can't simply be anyone who's looked at any green card over the last few sets realizes that everything's overcosted, overcomplicated, and just nowhere near on par with the other colors. We've talked about how like green should be the removal color. It should be some hand destruction, but not all hand destruction, because when hand destruction's having its day, no one's having fun. It should be board control. It should also be growing into Z energy control as well. Android Super 17 was so close to being like really cool, and then they just did the green thing to it. Unison Cooler, you've seen Roshi and Turtle School kind of do a little bit. Green KP just had a good showing, I think, in the last online regional. Who knows about OG Broly coming back, but again, no one likes hand destruction. Green cannot be a color that's just like, did you see your dormant? Did you see your unison? Are they together on the board at the same time? Like, did you see exactly what you needed to survive through some of this incredible stuff that these other decks can do? So, like, green could come back if those other things of red mainly would be hit, which would be really cool. But as a whole, and I'm not trying to go on a last-minute green rant here, but, like, green just needs to have more of what its identity is. And that, like, red, blue, and yellow have so much removal via what those things do, right? Yellow is rest mode removal, but like everything's naturally in rest mode, or else your opponent isn't playing the game and you put stuff in rest mode anyway. Blue literally has way too many cards that force your opponent to like bottom deck a card or bounce it back to hand or bottom of the deck from battle area. Red has negs, right? Minusing energy. And the thing is, while red specifically just says like a power level, yes, it doesn't get rid of anything above 15k for the most part. Most of it's minus 15k, but most stuff is 15k, right? Or there's multiple 15ks that can get, you know, things that are bigger than 15. So like every color, red, blue, yellow, I think in like the umbrella statement of removal does more removal than green does. Green has to go through and jump a bunch of hoops. Green should just have straight up, if it's X or less, KO it. It should also have, I think, the most barrier removal of any color, because again, it is the removal color. Right. And so that's how you balance green, right? Okay, if it doesn't draw a whole lot, well, you do have really strong removal, and that's how you kind of balance this resource trading. But also everything costs way too damn much in green. Everything like in every other color costs one that does something really cool.
Yep.
Everything in green, unfortunately, like there's not enough one cost red stuff.
Right.
Or one cost green ship. So that's the biggest thing with green. And we just needed to kind of throw that in there because that's at least one of the biggest things I've noticed is that there's just an imbalance of the value in this game where it's drawing, it's removing, and it's balancing all those things out. It's how much value each card per energy does it give you, and green's just so far behind, and like green just needs to be way more generic and less hand destruction, but more removals, the energy control and stuff like that.
Green is just, it's the meme deck. It's like, hey, we have this really cool idea for an archetype, but we don't want to put it in a color that actually makes a difference right now, so they're like, throw it in green. Green is the most creative color in this game, and I do wish more colors did that, but also we kind of see why green is the worst color right now is because it's too creative. It now becomes too restrictive, it's too complicated, it's too costly, it's great ideas, bad execution.
Right, I actually agree. And I think Bandai, I don't think you're listening, but there needs to be much more thought into the energy restriction of certain cards, where some cards that read you having X amount of energy or your opponent having X amount of energy. Because so like everything in like SS4 and Sin and like the good red stuff, top tier decks say when you have a certain amount, because it means that if you go first, then like you have the most value, you can push out sooner than your opponent. And then if it says your opponent must have, then depending on what number you puts you behind. So like Red Android 13, the big guy and your one drop 13 can't do anything crazy until you or my opponent has 3 energy, which means either I have my turn 4 because my opponent has 3, or I go second when I have 3. Now, when a card says when you have 2 energy, it means that you have 2 energy going first or turn 2 going second, which the game is wildly different when either of you or your opponent has 2 energy as opposed to when your opponent has 3. And that just changes everything. So like the new Super 17, excuse me, that just came out was like super cool. It read really well. And then all of a sudden you realize all its cards say like when you're like, it's good cards. When you have 4 more energy, and it's like, well, what does it do until you have 4 energy? Well,
Nothing.
You just play a bunch of 1-drops, and maybe you play out one Super 17 before, but that's just like a 20k double that rips Z energy and maybe KOs something. That's it. That's your peak. Other than that specific card, you played a bunch of 1-drops that maybe draw or recur themselves. So literally, you're doing nothing for several turns, and then when it's time to like do something, when you have 4 energy, whatever you're doing does nothing. It's not enough, right? A token negate stops the big 17s, a double duel, 30k.
Yep.
Whatever. But like, it's just not enough. And I just think Bandai does not understand how much it hamstrings decks via energy, whatever, the threshold you need to use certain things. But in general, green just needs to be generic enough. It needs to have different times of removal, different ways to affect the game. And it just stop with the overcost, stop with things being way too complicated, stop with the meme stuff. You were so close this past set. Like that Goku could have done the same exact thing if you just had to make it thematic. You just had to make it so a Zero and a Mew were in your warp the whole time. So like you can't play token negates, you can't do whatever amount of things that deck restricts you when you like play that package and stuff.
Right.
Why couldn't it be on your leader, warp a Goku, draw 2 on attack to get it into your warp?
Yeah.
No other cards, no nothing. It just doesn't make any sense. And this is a whole conversation that could be had, but overall, just green needs help. And you have to look in the mirror, Bandai, and understand what you're doing when you make certain things the way you make them.
No, I love that. Yeah. If these top 4 decks here hit, then green has a great chance of coming back into the limelight, especially if they got like a good archetype next set that's more generic and not so complicated, not so memey. But then of course black's getting good. Black's getting really good again. Cumber's solid, but it's still a little bit black is still probably the 4th best color in the game. It's above green, but it's below the other 3. and I want to see it
Yeah,
thrive
it
more.
suffers from some of the same things that green does.
Yep.
Where like defensively, you kind of have to see certain stuff. It's a little energy hungry as well. But like Cumber does some crazy stuff, and there are some really good black cards. But I think like offensively, black is really good. But then it's defensively, like unless you have like one up for protector, it doesn't really have any goods like super good floodgates that really feel super impactful. It has a token negate, cool. But other than that, it just doesn't feel as strong
The
defensively.
matchup, the matchup against Gogeta is awful. I played it. Gogeta literally combos off all its own battle cards, and Cumber needs your opponent to have battle cards in play.
Right.
If it doesn't have battle cards, Cumber's useless. You can't play anything.
Yeah, it's really bad, dude. If you've never ever played Cumber into a yellow deck that has you are number one, you can literally if they see that thing, you can never go to one because you're black, which means that you need to have one up for protector or something similar. And then if you don't have like a bunch of token negates, like multiple, if you are number one, you into that Goku and tap you out, you're just kind of dead because what are you gonna do about 345k triple swings if you don't have token negates? So yeah, just as simple as that. Like it sucks, but like, and I've had that happen to me several times. It's just a bummer. Black also needs help. But I do think black is a weird color because it does a lot of stuff. It's like it can be hand control, it can be board control. It's just like a weirder green that when like stuff in warp's way more impactful than stuff in drop.
Right.
But basically that's it. It does some cool stuff, but it's also just a little bit behind as well.
Right, and that's just if those top 4 decks leave, black can see a resurgence, green can see one. It's just there's so many benefits, guys. That's all we're saying. If these 4 leaders were nerfed or banned, there could be a huge, diverse meta showing up, even more than we have now, and other colors can really shine that just can't shine with these top 4. But I think this is a really good discussion. I was actually talking with Giancarlo. He said that if, maybe we need to do another like roundtable discussion like this in the future, get some people on here and get a couple more people to just kind of talk about the state of the game and what can be done better. Talking to the players, some of the better players in the game. But I really like this, though. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting. I love hearing your thoughts and opinions, and it's nice getting these on camera and instead of just through text messaging.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
But hey, any shout outs you want to give out before we head out?
Not entirely. Just shout out everybody up here in Minnesota, and everyone I've met in the community. There's just, there's been so many. Love the game. Want it to be healthy. Conversation's good, as opposed to what many people want to say or think, and who just complain about complainers or anything like that. Like, conversation's good, man. It's not a bad thing. It's not weak-minded or anything negative to have a conversation. Sure, if the conversation is literally not a conversation, say whatever you want. But like, we didn't just speak out of our ass for an hour about how much we hate red for no reason. We talked. We went through everything. And this is the type of content that I think the community needs and needs to just simply acknowledge, whether they would agree with it or not, because there sure as hell are going to be people who probably don't agree with what we said. But you can't acknowledge that it's not like that it is a good thing for the community to just have conversations, to talk and understand everyone else's viewpoint about the game.
Right. You can love something, but also understand it has problems and has issues. And
it's all about how you handle it, truly.
Yeah. If you can't admit that, then you're lying to yourself at that point. You're just trying to ignore something because you don't want to admit there's a problem. But that's just 2 guys talking here. But thank you guys so much for watching the video. Thank you to Mikey for taking time out of his day to talk about this. And hey, I'm on my way to 500 subs. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that follow button. You would be making my life so much better with that support. And we'll see you guys on the next video. Take care.